webinar series as part of the HKU-UBS Sustainable and Social Innovation Leadership Program. So today's topic will be cross-sector collaboration. And because we are very pressed on time, so we would like, again, I will just quickly go through the rundown today. I will simply introduce very briefly the purpose of today's seminar, and then we will pass our times to our esteemed two guest panelists today. We have Dr. Fan from Forget Me Not, as well as Ms. Teresa Ma. From Peace Generation. So before we proceed and pass our time to them to introduce their work on cross-sector collaboration, I just want to take a moment to introduce once again the SSILP program. So it is a new initiative and a collaboration between Hong Kong U and UBS, and we seek to build capacity and competence of NGO current as well as future leaders. The second objective, again, of the program is to develop a network and collaborations among different stakeholder groups in society, including NPOs, philanthropies, public, private, as well as academic sectors. And the third is to incubate and innovate new projects and ideas that are sustainable, in hopes to deliver shared social value. So welcome to the second luncheon seminar that is associated with this program. So we want to, at the end of this seminar, enable participants to gain the knowledge and insights about the advantages, as well as some of the risks that are associated with cross-sector collaboration, something that many sectors are now emphasizing on in response to increasingly complex societal challenges. We also want our participants to take away some of the key lessons learned, as well as skill set from our field practitioners. They are very experienced, as well as I'm sure they will be able to share with us some of the insights while navigating and negotiating between different interest groups, as well as different stakeholders representing perhaps different views. Okay, so again, what we will do now is I will now invite Dr. Fan, Chairman of Forget Me Not, to first spend 50 minutes to share with us his work as the chairman of this NGO. And then after 50 minutes, we will have Ms. Teresa Ma, founder and director of Peace Generation, to share with us her work for 50 minutes. And then based on the feedback from last seminar, we understand that many of the participants would like to have a more interactive dialogue with our guest speakers. So after the two sharings, we will open the floor and I'll be able to facilitate your questions. So if you do have questions, you could either raise your hand at the end while we open the floor, or you can write down the questions in the chat box as well. Okay, so we shall begin now, and without further ado, let me introduce and welcome Dr. Fan. You may share your screen now and take it away for 50 minutes. Thank you very much.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can continue to enjoy your maybe a quick lunch and also have a good dialogue with you and also discussion later. I'm a surgeon and I focus on cancer surgery and different kind of emergency surgery in hospital. My major audience of my NGO Forget Me Not is general public. So I'm sorry that some of the material is in English, but it's in Chinese. I will try to explain more why I set up this NGO and what was achieved through a trans-sector approach. Initially, why I want to involve in end-of-life service, some people may question a surgeon and also a cancer surgeon try to rescue life. But I think every one of you know that no matter how advanced the technique of medicine and also surgery, we are not God. And so we cannot really prevent people from dying. But whether we could let the people to have a good death and dying, I think this is very important. And so the mission of Forget-Me-Not is to try to raise the quality of life together with different stakeholders, because no one can work alone in this world. And concerning the end of life, even in a Western culture, there's still a lot of myth, and this is very common. So initially, how I work out this transactor model is first, what is my own position and my value? Try to tell the people how to manage their last journey for themselves and also their family. I think whether we have choice and also have the ownership and make the decision in advance is the most important. And to make sure you can have your will and also how you care for yourself and also how your family can support you. Very good communication and empathy, understanding, respect, this kind of attributes is very important. And when we talk about death and dying, most people will either turn away from it or, okay, this should be the responsibility of a doctor. Please help me and help my family to manage their health and also to manage their disease. You can do your best and you can succeed. But honestly, I think there is also a myth in between. As a doctor, of course, we rescue life and we try to help to make people stay away from disease. But could we really prevent regrets, decrease the burden, and restore the dignity and, of course, suffering of a human, I would say? I try not to use the word patient, because I think this is a common value of everyone who focus on humanity want to achieve. And so I first want to understand what is the real meaning of facing dying or death as an individual. So we, as an organization, we keep on learning and also have to engage different people, especially academic, to understand what is an individual need towards the end of life, what is the relationship need, and how to put it in a practical practice. And so we try to map out all the things that we think is very important to ensure an individual and his or her family to pre-plan for everything, to ensure that to lessen the suffering and also the regrets. And after that, we then try to see whether the way we can work this out is all by ourselves. Do we have enough resources? Of course, it's not enough. Can we get someone on board to have to share the same value with us and to work together? Definitely, yes. But how to make sure everything is in synergy and also can in line? I think that is quite important. And the first step is we try to see whether it fits into the public policy. That is what the government wants to do. And at the moment, I think aging in place and also dying in place is the way forward when we think about an aging society and of course, increasing in the burden in the public hospital. So for Forget-Me-Not, we, based on what we know, we develop a holistic end-of-life care service to anchor into our backbone. For us, our major expertise is on provision of medical profession and also home care and our funeral service, which is specific on life celebration, which we want to bring into the Hong Kong culture. Is for Hong Kong people, we need choice. But for the funeral service, it seems we don't have too much choice and it's not very personalized and also fit into the local culture that we can design for what we need to celebrate our family. So we set up this kind of the model and then we do the key stakeholder mapping. We map out all the key stakeholder in the society that is related to the end of life journey. From insurance, finance, legal, to religious leader, to different kind of people surrounding a dying patient. And we don't underestimate the importance of retired group and at this juncture about the caregivers, because we believe that one of the major myths or the gap is about the mismatch of the expectation and about the open dialogue with those people facing death and dying. And I think caregivers and people who are at the retired group are very important. So after that, we try to map all these important stakeholders into what we plan to do. At the base is those groups we think, no matter which aspect related to the whole end of life journey from before death, in a very advanced early middle age life, up to taking up as a carer role to after death. We map out all this as a backbone, and so that we can engage each other, so that we know what are the pain points, what are the good services that already existing locally, and what are the good experience, or even I would say bad experience, that we could learn, and then we can try to map out all these importance element, so that we know how to get forward. We take the leverage on the expertise, as I mentioned, for GetFinot, about the medical knowledge and also the direct expert service we can provide. So around 7 years ago, we start with proactive promotion about the advanced directive, because there is a huge gap in the community to understand what it is, how it helps to protect the dignity of a dying patient, and how to lessen the burden. And then move on, we then put in the aging in place together with dying at home as the real service that we can provide through a trendsetter approach, collaboration in the community, and also as a role model building. And then we move on to let the people to understand through all this kind of the preparing and supporting people in the community, we can then have the capacity, or you can say, or the room for discussion about life celebration or green, how to make green approach as a kind of legacy in the community, because we try to promote the eco funeral as well, including the eco burial. So we move around different sector. We go to the electrical for advocacy. We have a different kind of the policy paper about advanced directive, dying in place. We have engaged different kind of academic and also hospital network, patient group, different kind of cancer group, and also insurance, to let them to know how to preparing. We proactively participate in the JCECC conference over the years, and so far we have 7 papers to be presented, and also to try to work with the community together with our sharing of the experience. As I said, we try to work with different institutes, and we are quite proud to have a very different kind of innovative idea. For example, we have to bring in a very traditional culture of having the coffee at home, but we try to make it into furniture. And so we have worked with Ningnan Innovative Center to make up this kind of the things. And while we move forward to try to build up a very good model of how to make sure that a different kind of legacy, from body donation, organ donation, and also insurance policy donation, can be merged with the end of life will program, such that to maximize, I would say, the possibility of a good death and dying that is connected to the greater benefit of society, because it is try to modernize traditional culture of Chinese, we call Fuk Yam, how to give our blessing to our next generation. And through the transsector model, we successfully let the public to know that indeed through training, we train different kind of and also different entity in the community, from the funeral service provider to those general practitioner, how to build up a model for a one-stop solution to support people who are willing and trying to support their family members to die at home. And for the last 3 years during the COVID-19, indeed, this is developing very fast in the community. And at the moment, for our organization, we support on average 3 to 4 families each month to enjoy this precious moment to be present with their family. And during the 5th surge of the COVID-19, because of our trans-sector model built up and also the multi-channel, we capture the burden in the hospital monitoring very quickly, and through negotiation with a local coffin producer and also different kind of new technology that can support preservation of body. We quickly work with different stakeholders because of the channel that we already present. We could provide support to preserve the dignity of those people who died and those people who really are in deep sorrow as family. And while at the same time, we try to talk directly with the policy makers and as well as the hospital service provider, how we could make sure that people have a better end of life journey to overcome this period. And because of our engagement and also proximity to different service provider, we quickly react to provide telemedicine support for people who face dying and also to encourage their family. And we work with Hong Kong Records to set up this WhatsApp new approaches to integrate the end of life service together with the psychological support and to train different volunteers to try to entertain those psychological tsunami, I would say. And so in summary, how we build up our model is first, we want to have a best practice as a frontline service provider. And we build model. And we use different kind of innovative model. We test it, we listen, we learn, and also we try to absorb good experience. And through this holistic approach, we are not doing alone. We try to work with each other and to improve the quality of life. Maybe some of you already know that the quality of death and dying in Hong Kong has been improved over the last few years, thanks to all the efforts of the stakeholders. But I think how to increase the local community capacity through this trans-sector approach model is the most important one, because we work outside the elderly homes and we really work in the community at the home setting, at the caregiver setting. And we try to use this best practice model together with the advocacy and public engagement. We use the model to resolve pain points in different sectors. And then we have used a kind of, you can say, a medical mindset is we do our audits and then we repeat this kind of the cycle from time to time to improve the service. We embed what we have said into our organization, the mind map. And so we try to merge with the government policy, the community gap. We look into the threats, and of course, that means the opportunity. And trans-sector approach has already been laid down 5 years ago in our organization plan, and so we deliver what we want to achieve. And finally, I hope you could understand more about our organization, and we also welcome different kind of collaboration. And I look forward is, I think the technology is definitely one thing that can help in the future to improve the quality of death and dying in Hong Kong. And I hope at some point of the journey, we could encounter and work with each other. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Fan. I'm sure as with other participants, I found your talk very inspiring, but we will save our questions for later. Okay, so let me now invite Ms. Teresa Ma from Peace Generation to share with us her work in this NGO that she founded. You may take it away, Teresa. Thank you very much.
Hi, I trust everyone can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, right. Let me just get on with this. Right. Actually, the topic given to us today, Dr. Van and myself, was about collaboration. And actually, the immediate thing that hit me was that but for the collaboration between UBS and Hong Kong University Social Work and Social Administration Department, this event would not have happened today, right? So we have, in a way, a living experience of the result of collaboration. We are going to focus on cross-sector collaboration, but there's one thing I'd like to ask the audience about, which is, what is your take on collaboration? Is collaboration just a fancy word for teamwork? So if you don't mind, could you actually, write into the chat box whether you agree or disagree, and then I will see if people would be willing to share why they agree or disagree. Even yes, no. 你可唔可以俾出我手睇啊？ Okay, so we have Mabel saying she disagrees. Anyone else? I think there are about 60 odd people in the group, so it'd be good to see, where everyone stands. Wow. Okay. Wow. Seems quite one-sided. Okay. Ah, right. Someone mentions that it could be a struggle, presumably to collaborate. Anyone else? No agreeers. So I'm just wondering, for those people who think that collaboration is not just a fancy word for teamwork, would you mind just sharing why you feel this way, why this is your view? John agree. Oh, John, okay, somebody does agree, okay. I'm sorry, Mabel, would you mind saying why you disagree, since you came up first? You were so quick to respond. I hope you don't mind my picking on you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay, thanks for inviting me. I think a collaboration, if it just confines itself to teamwork, then it actually misses out a lot of good elements. I think collaboration is also the opportunity to recreate or co-create. So it's not just talking about people working together, but there will be new things being developed and also new mindset. To me, it's also a way of empowerment, that you are helping each other to enhance the way that they're thinking, the way that they're working. So it's actually a word that is more than just teamwork.
Wonderful. Gosh, I heard so many fantastic words like, opportunities, empowerment, co-creation. Would anyone else like to add to what Mabel has just shared in terms of why collaboration is different from teamwork? Who else? I know it's lunchtime. I was talking to a colleague about this, and actually what my colleague told me was that the feel of collaboration is more equitable, right? Whereas in teamwork, you tend to impose a hierarchy of some sort. Now, I don't know whether everyone agrees with that or not, but that is another approach to differentiation between collaboration and teamwork. Rob, what do you think? Rob Stewart.
Sorry, getting off mute. I think it's interesting. I always sort of see collaboration a little bit outside the team, whereas with the team, you tend to be uniform and have a goal, and it's fairly clear, so you work together. Whereas the collaboration at its best comes in when you're working across a company or a group of different people. And I think the other word we're missing as well is enablement. And you can only have that enablement when you're going out and sort of showing what you do to others, maybe.
Okay, so it's actually kind of leaving your professional comfort zone in a way. Okay, that's really, really helpful. What about Cheryl? We'll just ask Cheryl the question and then we'll move on.
There are some responses in the chat box, but I think collaboration primarily is more strategic and also tries to leverage on the strengths for each stakeholder, whereas teamwork, it seems, as Rob said, a shared goal, but then division of labor and very perhaps less dynamic in my point of view.
Okay, excellent. Well, that actually sets the tone very, very nicely for a number of things I'm going to be talking about over the next 10 to 15 minutes. I mean, collaboration is actually key in my area of work. So what I like to talk about today has a particular focus, which is how do we do cross-sector collaboration in peace building? Now, peace is not something which is wholly familiar when I talk to people in Hong Kong, right? Whether they're friends or colleagues or strangers. So I'm going to take this opportunity to discuss a little bit what peace means for us in this current state. When I set up Peace Generation about 2 and a bit years ago, the first question, the most frequently asked question of me was, what is peace? What does peace mean? Now, we actually take peace, the way we look at Peace Generation is that we look at all aspects of peace. So this particular theory on negative and positive peace come from a gentleman called Johan Galton, who is credited as the founder of peace study, a Norwegian sociologist. Negative peace, according to him, means the absence of physical direct violence, while positive peace means actually the absence also of structural violence and also of cultural violence. So when there is negative peace and positive peace, there is no violence. So no physical violence, no structural violence, and no cultural violence. In other words, what you get is that there is a sense of personal as well as community safety and security. There is also justice in the system. And ultimately, in order to overcome cultural violence, there has to be empathy. At this point, I like to quote Johan Galton on empathy because it actually nearly moved me to tears. What he said empathy is the ability to suffer the suffering of others, but also the ability to enjoy the joy of others. And on numerous occasions when I go and talk to people, particularly people in our field working in civil society and NGOs, we tend to focus on the former, right? I ask them to think of a scenario that would evoke the word empathy. They always think of, people who are not very well capacitated. They think about tears and all that. But in fact, the ability to exercise empathy means that we're also happy when other people are happy. And most of my friends tell me, in fact, that second aspect of empathy is more difficult than the first. So let's, also in our work today, when we talk about empathy in the peace building context, think about also how we can enjoy achievements. The other thing that people ask me quite a lot, having now, sort of understood a little bit the framework of what peace means, is that then what is it you do? What is it you do? And people would always come up with me and say, are you into making peace, keeping peace, or building peace? And in any event, what's the difference? So I'm going to take the occasion to try and kind of lay the groundwork for these three aspects of working on peace. So I do peace building. Peace generation is into peace building work. And how is it different from peacemaking and peacekeeping? So when we talk about peacemaking, this is a typical scenario, right, where political leaders of a country get together and they have kind of showing you, a treaty that they have just signed. In this particular picture, this was Colombia. The president of Colombia, Santos, he's actually just stepped down, is the person on your left. And then on the right is Timoshenko. That is his nom de guerre, his war name. And he was the leader of the FARC rebel army. And the two of them actually signed a peace treaty in 2016. I was actually traveling in Colombia at the time, just by chance. And the person in the middle is, in fact, the president of Cuba. So Cuba was facilitating the peace treaty between the Colombian government and the rebel army. So that is typically the scenario you see when you talk about peacemaking. It is about bringing parties to agreement through peaceful means, right? Negotiation, producing incentives and the like. Also, although you may not think of it in this way, the United Nations Charter itself, being a treaty, is a prime example of peacemaking. And so are the many, many treaties that, follow in that tradition that, ensue from the UN organization, and is actually multiple offsprings. Now, on to peacekeeping. I think they used to be blue helmets, but now they're softer, more women are involved in UN peacekeeping. So now we see blue berets rather than blue helmets. They are a very familiar sight on the news. They tend to be either lightly armed or unarmed, and their personnel, drawn from different countries that then go under the command of the UN. And what they do is that they are deployed to conflict areas to either observe the peace process or to try and maintain ceasefire. So that's what peacekeeping is, to maintain ceasefire. It is very easy to think that only armed and military personnel can do peacekeeping. This is actually not the case. The picture you now see with all these individuals dressed in this fluorescent pink vests is in fact a picture from the Philippines on Mindanao Island. These individuals are private citizens from a particular church in the Philippines, and they are patrolling an area occupied by a group of indigenous people of about 170 families or so. That is because the neighboring indigenous people tend to occupy farmland, and farmland always has a lot of potential and therefore value. And in this particular case, the place where the indigenous people were occupying, in fact, was under encroachment. So they were fired at, and whenever they had harvest, people would release, livestock to eat up the produce and all that. So the church sent a team of people to go and patrol the area, and they were unarmed. All they had were cameras, and cell phones to record what they were able to see. So increasingly, civilians are also involved in actually peacekeeping. And in fact, there is a view that when people who are involved in peacekeeping are civilians and are unarmed, the chances of peace are much higher. And by the way, this form of civilian peacekeeping also happens in various areas in Palestine and in Israel. Then I come to peace building. Peace building is actually a kind of new generation idea within the peace community. And what it does is that it thinks about prevention, and it thinks about transformation of conflict. So it is not just to keep the conflict low. It is actually, you think about prevention, and then we think about how we actually use conflict, because in the conflict we get a lot of messages, right? It is a way of communication. So how do we then take the information which is given to us and transform that? And the number of means are as many as you can think of. So it kind of unleashes creativity. We're no longer confined to thinking about in armed or unarmed terms. We are no longer confined to thinking, oh, we must produce an agreement that would be signed by various parties at the end of this. So this is what Peace Generation is doing in Hong Kong. I won't have a huge amount of time to talk about the minutiae of what we do, but I do want to bring up some concepts that are fundamental to peace building and actually sit within the collaboration space. So the next thing I want to talk about is how peace building does mean collaboration across sectors and disciplines, right? So I'll go back to the UN. The SDGs, the term is now a buzzword. Everyone talks about it, right? From, primary school students to august banks. I'm sure that UBS has a huge amount of effort put into actually developing understanding of SDG and how, the bank contribute to it, likewise within the university. But what I want to remind people is of two things. One, in the introduction to the SDG, it is described as a blueprint for peace and prosperity. So let's not forget the UN roots for peace building and peacekeeping and peacemaking, right? The other thing is that the SDGs are described as a global partnership, because in order to tackle these vast issues that have commonality and universality, we cannot do it without collaboration. But we'll move away to something a bit closer to home at a later stage. So we talk about also the possibility of actually cross-sector discussions on peace. There happens to be a historical event where physics and neurology came together. And it was between Einstein and Freud. This is not very well known, but anyway, I want to kind of, talk through this today. So their collaboration was actually in the form of an exchange of letters. So essentially, Einstein wrote first, and he said, is it possible to control man's mental evolution so as to make him proof against the psychosis of hate and destructiveness? So in essence, Einstein was saying, how can we stop human beings from making war? Okay. So, and then Freud wrote back. And this is, I think, quite characteristic of Freud. He always sounds a little bit irritable. So he said, I expected you to choose a problem lying on the borderland of the knowable, i.e., why have you put to me such a difficult question? Okay. Now, I'm not going to actually talk about what Freud said in response to the question. If you want the exchange of letters, you can PM me and I'll send it to you.
Sorry, Teresa.
Yes?
Apologies, but we are quite pressed on time.
Okay,
So
I will finish very soon.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, but what I want to do is to draw attention to one individual. This is a guy called Leon Stinning. He was actually instrumental in getting Einstein to write the letter and actually getting Freud to reply. You may or may not know this. Freud apparently blamed Einstein for Freud not getting the Nobel Prize in medicine, because Einstein actually refused more than once to endorse the nomination of Freud for the Nobel Prize. So how did Leon Stinning do it, right? So he was a connector who enabled two giants who were not on good terms to exchange ideas on peace. So one of the key messages I want to bring up today was that in collaboration, we often tend to think about the key parties, but we don't think about the people who connect, the go-betweens, the facilitators. their role is critically important because they are the ones who have the inspiration, the connection, the diplomacy, the facilitation skills, and very often, crucially, patience. So that's what I want to bring up in collaboration. The other thing I wanted to talk about, and that will bring us to the end of my bit, which is one of the events that Peace Generation held for the public. In fact, it was our first public event back in November last year. We wanted to see if people were, what the public perception was of peace and peace building. So we felt we needed to face a public. So we were looking for places to hold our event. It was actually very clear from the outset that we did not want to be confined to a single space. So one of my colleagues, and actually she's online as well today, actually pounded the streets and knocked on doors and explained what we were hoping to do. Eventually, we settled on a street in the Western District, Potak Street. It's a dead-end street. We did not just ask to rent space for our activities, but in fact, we invited the people we met to contribute ideas and then to be collaborators because we wanted to bring peace to the street level. And in the end, we had parallel events in different stores and in nooks and corners and all that. And even the shopkeepers who did not participate ended up actually helping us to promote the event. So these are some of the pictures. So we were in a bookstore, we were in a cafe where we invited strangers to talk to one another and we provided dialogue menus to them. So we called it the Rocky Tatantang. Rocky was our little mascot. We were also in an artist studio in the same street and they actually got together to produce collaborative efforts, right, in sewing and in making things. This picture shows you how collaborative we were because this is neither a cafe nor a tea shop. It is in fact the outside area of a pet grooming store. So we knocked on the door because it's very hard to kind of associate pet grooming, dogs and cats and other animals with peace, but we found a way and then they gave us the space. That little blue thing, in fact, is the menu of how much it takes to do a trim for a little puppy. And then we also, got engaged in tea stores. I think what in the end was very interesting for the exercise was that actually we got the community and the shopkeepers in that street together. And then for the first time in June this year, i.e. about 7 months later, they launched their own street festival. So as a result of our going to them for collaboration, they have themselves become connectors and collaborators. So these are the key concepts I brought to you today, and my little presentation's over. Sorry, I've taken up more time than I should have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you very much for both of your sharing. So without further ado, now we are open to the floor for questions. So what I would ask you to do is first raise your hand or you can type your questions in the chat box for either of our guests or both. Do we have any questions or feedback from the floor, from our guests?
I found it very interesting to listen to Teresa explanation and also how to build the collaboration. And I really agree that collaboration is not just a teamwork, although many people work together. For my experience, indeed, I need to collaborate with people who disagree because they are the key stakeholder. We should not let them slip away from our network. And sometimes people will not collaborate because just maybe they don't understand. They don't share the same line of vision. But sometimes when we talk about vision, we talk about value because we have different culture, different background and experience, just like the SDG. But when we talk about ESG, maybe for the business world, they will be more in line or willing to talk about. When we go to the community, we talk about humanity, it's more easy to engage the social sector. When we talk about how we can facilitate those general practitioners to participate in the home death, because many of their long-term clients will end up with death and dying, and they don't have the willingness or resources to go to even the private hospital, and they don't want to go to the public hospital, and they don't want to go to the hospice home. So what can they do? And they have a long-term relation. So home death is a solution. Sometimes we have to use different language, but the same underlying value and the vision to try to collaborate with different people. Just a very quick response to Teresa's initial facilitation.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Rob has a question. Rob?
Yeah, and maybe to sort of take it on a little bit from those comments. A question, I guess, for both of you, maybe specifically for Teresa. In this part of the world, we see a lot of passive aggression, where you're not in a violent scenario at all, but you have, as you were describing there, people who passively resist something that may be good for them. So to both of you, how do you overcome that? And maybe Teresa, where do you see that in your construct of the peacekeeping, peace building sort of piece?
Very, it's an absolutely crucial question, but an extremely difficult one. How should we approach this? I mean, trust building is actually at the core of our work, right? And so what we do is that, I mean, like, what Dr. Pan was showing us, we do our stakeholder maps too. And in our case, cynics and critics loom large. They're not just people that we think would actually welcome a call from us, but people who don't want to talk to us. Because people who are critical of us, in fact, have very, very important messages. So obviously, in actually approaching those individuals or groups, it is very rare that a direct call will produce anything, which is where the connectors come in, right? So if I think Einstein had just written to Freud, given the history between them, Freud probably would never have replied, right? Or actually Einstein would probably have not written the letter in the first place. So you need people who are connectors to unlock the situation. We in NGOs and in the civil society space tend to think that if something has to be done, we must do it ourselves. And we don't think often enough about leveraging others and other people's connections. So that's how we do it. We try and find allies, and then we try and find allies to go and help build connections with people who don't agree with us. So that's the first thing, right? Not necessarily doing everything ourselves. Secondly, it is actually to try and understand their needs, where they're coming from, right? Why are they passive? Why do they feel they should not engage? And it could be for a variety of reasons. And that information tells us a lot more than if we just think in the dark and say, oh, well, it must be because, they don't have enough time or whatever it is. And this process of actually reaching out means that particular individual would have talked to not just me, but also the connector. So that it kind of gives you more fertile ground to build up the relationship. So by the time I get to talk to the persons or to the groups, they are much more amenable to things that we're going to discuss. I mean, I can talk forever about this, but I'd like to hear from Dr. Fan as well.
For me, I don't know, because maybe I'm a surgeon. Surgeon always have to cut into something. So my approach is very direct. I try to see what are the pain points. of the whole, I mean the market, and at the individual entity level or at the individual service level, what are the pain points? So through those pain points, can I do something? Either it may be a mindset change. For example, for the whole aging population, if we change the whole concept is why not let the elderly to speak for themselves what they want? Or just like, for example, University of Hong Kong Social Science have done a lot of research telling the people what the elderly would like to have towards their end of life. But in the community, the gap is the middle age group and also the caregiver. They don't want to have this kind of the dialogue because of some kind of the myth. So we have to overcome this and to do many showcase and to educate. And while at the same time for the government, they also have a headache, but they also have a myth. They don't know how to approach it. So why not use a public health approach and also use the primary care approach is because through the primary care, a lot of the community network through the district health center have doctor, have nurse, occupational therapist, speech therapist, those kind of the expertise to be established in 18 districts. And we really sort of this kind of the manpower towards the end of life journey. So we try to fit into the district health center setting and to collaborate with the NGO. And this is, I think maybe a way forward to really have a meaningful collaboration is to try to look from the other side and maybe something we are not really need to do, but through this kind of the analysis is benefit for an organization and while can benefit for the whole landscape.
Okay, thank you for the responses. Are there any questions other than so Amy has a question posed in the chat box. So from the two guests, she'd like to know if people have different diverse backgrounds, different value orientations, perspective, and belief systems. Reaching a common goal might not be easy. So how would you advise our participants here today, in whatever line of work they are, how to start actually having that dialogue and how to try to reach a consensus? From the two guests, please.
Okay, shall I have a go? I think, although, you know, when we think about peace and conflict, we tend to think of friends and enemies. Obviously, you know, we've just spent the last 5 minutes or so saying, how do we cross over to the other side and not just talk to friends? But also, I think we have to be very careful when approaching enemies or people who don't agree with us, or people, I don't like the word, but I'm just trying to kind of draw an extreme example, right? Because very often we go with the mindset of trying to convince someone instead of listening to what they have to say. And if we go with that mindset, we're bound to fail, right? The failure track record, I guarantee you, is going to be 100%. But what we do is to try and hone our skills. So one of the things I wanted to ask of this group is like, who do you think are in your community, right? Let's start with the physical space where you live. How familiar with you are the people who actually look after the place where you live, sweeping the streets, the security guard who knows everything in the community? You know, do you know the stores well? So, and if you are not seeing that as your primary community, do you see it as being the university, the bank, the particular organization where you work, and so on and so forth? And then think about how well you know your community and start to build connections there. And you'll be very surprised to find the richness and the complexity of thinking, even within the same community and the same organization. So if you want to start to practice and do something, Amy, I think I would suggest that you start with thinking about which community you treasure the most, and then within that community, how well you know people. And that's where I would start to, do something instead of saying, I must bring opposing parties together by creating a platform. I think many people have tried and have not succeeded.
Dr. Fan, maybe you want to add a word on that.
Very quick is indeed for Caffeine Not start with eco funeral and live celebration. And we believe it will benefit many Hong Kong elderlies and their family, because there is a healing approach and also a healing effect in the funeral that to decrease the regret. But for the very quick first 2 to 3 months, then I found that indeed it does not work, because we have a very weak pre-planning process in the community, because people do not have the mindset or the culture that after death, they should either to go for the very so-called very grand celebration, 風光大葬, or very quick finishing. But indeed, there will be leaving a lot of regret, because those are not really what the elderly wants or what the family wants. But we found that we need to go upstream to go to pre-planning. And so through that learning process, then we found that we have the expertise to fill up those pain points of different entities. My very quick summary is I think when we jump out of our own perspective and to look into a more holistic picture, I found the public health picture works everywhere and anytime, even after the COVID-19, because public health finally is to try to ensure people not only healthy, but being in a well-being status as a whole, as a community, in the community. I think that's quite good and can connect a lot of different stakeholders, because just like to make a city to have a better air quality, to have a good transport system that have a public health perspective, already can engage these two very different sector. And talking about aging in place, when you engage the construction industry, the architecture, indeed, they have a lot of good idea and very cost-effective way to create aging in place perspective. So you certainly will have a lot of people coming together with you and to make every small barricade open step by step. So this is just a very quick feedback and my experience.
Thank you very much. So I know we are very pressed on time. We have maybe pressed a little bit onwards. One last final remark, perhaps from the two guest speakers. So one participant asked, what are the key essential qualities and characteristics of a good facilitator and connector? And how can we empower them, maybe?
Is it asking me and Teresa?
Yes, both, yes.
Okay, then I go first. Open mind, keep dialogue, and empathetic. Because even for me, I don't know many things outside my field, but I'm willing to listen and to look up the material.
Thank you, Dr. Fan. And Teresa, any last remarks on that front?
Well, I don't think I can add to what Dr. Fan has just said, right? And in fact, I thought that all through the format today, I was not being a very good facilitator because I was talking too much. But listening is really key. And I just want to, again, reiterate Johann Galton's definition of empathy, right, which is the ability to suffer the suffering of others, but the ability to enjoy the joys of others. Facilitators can get exhaustion, and a lot of people tell me that they get stressed over exercising too much empathy, but that's because I think that they focus on the suffering but not on the joy, and we should try and be more balanced in the way we facilitate change in society.
Okay, So thank you very much, Dr. Fan and Ms. Ma, Teresa, for today's sharing. It's 1 hour long for this luncheon seminar. I'm sure that many of our participants actually have further questions to ask. So if you wouldn't mind, then perhaps we can pass along your email addresses to our participants. And if they do find this topic fascinating, as well as want to learn more from both of you in your work in your respective NGOs, then hopefully they could reach out and you can, again, you never know, there may be other types of cross-sector collaboration that is birth of today, birthing those collaborations in the future. So I would just like to take a moment to consolidate some of the key takeaway messages. So both guest speakers really spoke to the need for empathetic understanding, as well as needing to use the language to address those pain points and to leverage on the focus on the common goal, which is, I think, a shared humanity for the need to have a better quality of life. So that is a common language, I think, that every human being can relate to. And maybe that could be our starting point for future collaboration in whatever line of work that you are in. Okay, so thank you very much. Please join me. Clap, clap hands for our guest speakers, guest panelists today in this very hot day during lunch hour. And thank you for joining us during this 1 hour to listen to that work. And I hopefully you, along with myself, find this seminar very inspiring, and I wish you a wonderful day ahead, wonderful afternoon. So thank you very much for attending this seminar. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.